The morning sun cast long shadows across the glass walls of Richmond Industries as CEO David Thompson stood in his corner office, watching the chaos unfold on the factory floor below. For the past 3 months, his life had been consumed by one single maddening problem that threatened to destroy everything he had built over the past 15 years. In the center of the main production facility sat what should have been the company's crowning achievement, a revolutionary hybrid engine that promised to change the automotive industry forever. The prototype had cost $50 million to develop, represented years of research, and held patents that could make Richmond Industries one of the biggest players in clean energy transportation. Instead, it sat there like a giant, expensive paperweight, completely dead and apparently unfixable. David pressed his forehead against the cool glass and closed his eyes. The irony wasn't lost on him. This engine was supposed to be his legacy, the project that would prove he wasn't just another corporate suit who inherited Daddy's company. He had poured his heart, soul, and nearly every dollar of company resources into making this dream a reality. Now it looked like it might be the very thing that buried him. The phone on his desk buzzed for what felt like the 100th time that morning. He knew without looking that it was either another board member demanding answers he didn't have, or another investor pulling their funding. The quarterly meeting was just 2 weeks away, and he had no idea how he was going to explain to shareholders that their revolutionary engine had been reduced to the world's most expensive lawn ornament. Walking over to his desk, David picked up a thick folder filled with reports from various experts who had tried to solve the problem. The list read like a who's who of engineering brilliance: MIT professors, former NASA engineers, consultants from Germany's top automotive companies. They had all come, examined the engine, scratched their heads, and left with hefty consulting fees and no solutions. The engine's problem was as mysterious as it was complete. One day it had been running perfectly, exceeding all performance expectations in preliminary tests. Engineers were already planning the production line modifications needed for mass manufacturing. Then, without warning, it just stopped. Not a gradual decline or a specific component failure. It simply went from running flawlessly to being completely inoperable overnight. What made the situation even more frustrating was that the failure seemed to cascade through multiple systems simultaneously. The computer controls showed error codes that shouldn't exist. The fuel injection system was malfunctioning in ways that defied the original programming. Even the basic mechanical components seemed to be working against each other in impossible ways. Dr. Peterson, his lead engineer and longtime friend, had been the first to examine the problem. Peterson was brilliant, the kind of mind that could look at complex systems and immediately spot what others missed. But even he seemed baffled. After 2 weeks of intensive analysis, Peterson could only shrug and suggest bringing in outside help. That's when the parade of experts began. Each consultant arrived with confidence and impressive credentials. They would spend days studying blueprints, running diagnostics, and making authoritative pronouncements about potential solutions. Then they would implement their fixes, fire up the engine, and watch in bewilderment as nothing happened. The engine remained stubbornly, mysteriously broken. David remembered the conversation with Dr. Zhang, a professor from MIT who specialized in hybrid systems. She had studied the engine for a full week before admitting defeat. "Mr. Thompson," she had said, "in 30 years of engineering, I've never seen anything like this. It's as if someone took a perfectly functioning system and systematically broke it in ways that shouldn't be possible." The financial pressure was becoming unbearable. Richmond Industries had bet everything on this engine. They had taken out massive loans, promised incredible returns to investors, and signed preliminary agreements with 3 major car manufacturers. All of those deals were now in jeopardy. The banks were starting to make uncomfortable phone calls about loan payments. Investors were demanding to know when they might see returns on their investment. But it wasn't just about money. David's reputation was on the line. He had spent years building credibility in an industry that was notoriously difficult to break into. This engine was supposed to prove that a mid-sized company could compete with automotive giants. Instead, it was making him look like an amateur who had gotten in over his head. The worst part was the whispers. David could see it in people's faces when he walked through the office. Employees who had once looked at him with respect now seemed worried about their job security. Some of the best engineers were already updating their resumes, knowing that if the company went under, they needed to find new positions quickly. Late at night, when David stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone home, he would sometimes walk down to the factory floor and stare at the engine. It looked perfect, sleek, modern, and sophisticated. All the external components appeared to be in working order. The problem was somewhere deeper, hidden in the complex interaction of systems that nobody seemed able to understand. He had tried everything he could think of: different diagnostic equipment, alternative testing procedures, even bringing in specialists from completely different industries who might offer fresh perspectives. Nothing worked. The engine remained as mysterious and broken as the day the problem first appeared. David's wife had started making worried comments about his health. He wasn't sleeping well, barely eating, and spending 18 hours a day at the office. His teenage kids complained that he had missed more family dinners in the past 3 months than in the previous 3 years. But how could he explain to them that everything they had, their house, their security, their future, depended on solving this one impossible problem? The cleaning crew had just arrived for their evening shift, quietly moving through the offices with their carts and supplies. David watched them work, envying their simple, straightforward jobs. They came in, cleaned what needed cleaning, and went home. No impossible problems, no crushing pressure, no sleepless nights wondering if tomorrow would bring the solution or another expensive failure. One of the cleaning women was working near the engine area, methodically mopping the floor, around the massive prototype. David had seen her many times over the years but had never really paid attention. She was probably in her 40s, worked quietly and efficiently, and seemed to take pride in her work. Unlike some of the night crew who tried to finish as quickly as possible, she always took her time to do things properly. As David watched, something caught his attention. The woman had stopped mopping and was looking at the engine with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't the casual glance of someone simply cleaning around an obstacle. She was studying it with what looked like genuine interest, maybe even understanding. For a moment, David felt a spark of desperate hope. What if the solution wasn't going to come from another expensive consultant or renowned expert? What if it was right here, hidden in plain sight, in the most unlikely place he could imagine? Diana Williams pushed her cleaning cart through the quiet hallways of Richmond Industries, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. It was just past 8 in the evening, and most of the office workers had gone home hours ago. This was her world now: the empty offices, the humming machines, and the peaceful silence that came when the busy daytime chaos finally settled down. She had been working this job for 8 years, ever since her husband Robert died in that terrible car accident. 8 years of mopping floors, emptying trash cans, and wiping down desks where people made more money in a month than she made in a year. But Diana never complained. This job had kept food on the table and a roof over her head and her daughter's head when everything else in her life had fallen apart. Most people at Richmond Industries barely noticed her. She was part of the background, like the furniture or the air conditioning system. Employees would walk past her without making eye contact, sometimes talking on their phones about important business deals while she cleaned around their feet. She had gotten used to being invisible. In some ways, it was easier that way. What they didn't know, what nobody at Richmond Industries knew, was that Diana had once been someone very different. Before Robert died, before the medical bills and the mortgage payments and the desperate scramble to survive, she had been an engineer. A good one, too. She had graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in mechanical engineering and later earned a master's degree in automotive systems from the University of Michigan. For 12 years, she had worked at various engineering firms, designing components for everything from lawn mowers to jet engines. She loved the work, the problem-solving, the precision, the satisfaction of making something complex work perfectly. Her colleagues respected her ideas, and she was climbing the career ladder steadily when Robert's accident changed everything. The cue. Medical bills came first. Even with insurance, the costs of Robert's months in the hospital were staggering. Then came the funeral expenses, the mortgage payments on a house they had bought expecting two incomes, and all the daily costs of raising a teenage daughter alone. Diana's engineering salary was good, but not good enough to handle all of that pressure at once. She had tried to keep working as an engineer while dealing with the financial crisis, but it was impossible. The stress affected her performance. She was distracted during important meetings, made mistakes on projects, and couldn't put in the long hours that engineering jobs often demanded. When the company started laying people off, she was among the first to go. Finding another engineering job while dealing with grief, financial pressure, and single parenthood proved almost impossible. Engineering firms wanted people who could work long hours and travel for projects. They wanted someone completely focused on the job. Diana needed something stable, something that would let her be home when her daughter needed her, something that wouldn't disappear if she had to take time off for a school emergency or a sick day. The cleaning job at Richmond Industries wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. The pay was enough to cover the basic bills, and the night shift meant she could be available during the day when her daughter was at school. Most importantly, it was honest work, and Diana had never been ashamed of honest work. Over the years, she had watched the company grow and change. She had seen new products developed, new employees hired, old ones leave. She knew which executives were having affairs, which departments were struggling with budgets, and which projects were succeeding or failing. People talked freely around her, as if she wasn't there to hear them. The engine project had fascinated her from the beginning. As she cleaned the engineering offices, she couldn't help but notice the blueprints and technical documents scattered across desks. Her engineering mind automatically absorbed the information, understanding the complex systems even though nobody asked for her opinion. She had watched the excitement build as the engine neared completion. Engineers worked late into the night, discussing technical specifications with the kind of enthusiasm Diana remembered from her own engineering days. She found herself looking forward to cleaning the engineering wing, hoping to catch glimpses of their progress. When the engine started having problems, Diana noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. The excited conversations turned into worried whispers. The confident engineers began looking stressed and defeated. She saw the parade of expensive consultants coming through, each one promising to solve the mystery that had everyone baffled. Tonight, as she cleaned around the engine area, Diana found herself studying the massive prototype more carefully than usual. She had been looking at it for months, but always quickly, while focusing on her cleaning duties. Now, with the factory floor empty and quiet, she allowed herself to really examine it. The engine was beautiful in the way that well-designed machines could be beautiful. Every component seemed perfectly placed, every connection clean and purposeful. But as Diana looked more closely, something bothered her. Her engineering instincts, dormant for years but never completely gone, were telling her that something wasn't quite right. She couldn't put her finger on it at first. The engine looked perfect from the outside. All the major components were where they should be. The wiring appeared correct, but there was something subtle, something that nagged at her professional eye. David Thompson was still in his office, she noticed. She had seen him staying later, and later as the engine problems continued. Through the glass walls, she could see him pacing, talking on the phone, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Diana felt sorry for him. She remembered that feeling of overwhelming pressure, of being responsible for solving problems that seemed impossible. She had liked Mr. Thompson during her years at the company. He was one of the few executives who would nod politely when they passed in the hallway, who treated the cleaning staff with basic respect. As she continued her work, Diana found herself thinking about the engine problem from an engineering perspective. She thought about the symptoms the consultants had described in their conversations, the cascading system failures, the impossible error codes, the way everything seemed to break down at once. In her mind, she began running through possible causes, the way she used to do when faced with complex problems in her engineering days. The systematic approach came back to her naturally. Eliminate the obvious causes first, then look for connections between symptoms, then consider the less obvious possibilities. Her daughter Carmen was a senior in high school now, with dreams of going to college. Diana had been saving money for years, but college tuition was expensive, and their savings account was still pretty small. Sometimes Diana wondered what life might have been like if Robert hadn't died, if she had been able to continue her engineering career. Carmen was smart enough for any college she wanted to attend, but intelligence didn't pay tuition bills. Diana finished cleaning the area around the engine and moved on to the next section of the factory floor, but her mind kept returning to what she had seen. Something about the engine bothered her, some detail that didn't quite fit with what it should look like. Maybe it was foolish to think she could solve a problem that had stumped so many experts. After all, she had been out of engineering for 8 years. Technology had moved forward. Systems had become more complex. What could a cleaning lady possibly contribute to solving such a sophisticated problem? But as Diana continued her work, that night she couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen something important, something that everyone else had missed. 3 days had passed since Diana first noticed something odd about the engine, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. During her regular cleaning routine, she found herself spending extra time in the engineering wing, listening to conversations, and picking up pieces of technical information that others dropped carelessly around her. The situation was getting worse for everyone at Richmond Industries. She could see it in people's faces, hear it in their worried phone calls. The company was running out of time and money. Yesterday, she had overheard 2 engineers talking about updating their resumes. The fear was spreading through the building, like a cold wind. Diana was wiping down desks in the main engineering office when she overheard David Thompson talking to Dr. Peterson about bringing in yet another consultant, this time from Japan, someone who specialized in hybrid engine failures. The conversation was tense, filled with the kind of desperate hope that comes when you're running out of options. "This has to work, Peterson," David was saying, his voice strained with exhaustion. "We can't afford another failed attempt. The board is breathing down my neck, and I'm not sure how much longer I can hold them off." Dr. Peterson sounded just as tired. "I know, David, but Dr. Yamamoto has an excellent reputation. If anyone can figure this out, it's him." Diana continued, cleaning, but her mind was racing. She had been thinking about the engine problem every night, analyzing what she remembered from her brief examinations. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that everyone was looking in the wrong direction. That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Diana made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of just cleaning around the engine, she was going to take a closer look. Really look, the way she used to examine complex problems during her engineering days. She wheeled her cart over to the engine area and set up her cleaning supplies as usual. Then, making sure she was alone, she approached the massive prototype with the focused attention of a trained engineer, rather than a cleaning lady trying to work around an obstacle. The first thing she noticed was something she had only glimpsed before. Tiny scratches around several access panels that shouldn't have been opened during normal operation. They were small, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, but they told a story of recent tampering. Diana's heart started beating faster. In her engineering days, she had learned to read the signs that equipment told about its history. These scratches suggested that someone had been inside the engine's control systems recently, doing work that wasn't documented in any of the official repair attempts she had overheard discussed. Moving closer, she examined the main computer interface. Everything looked normal at first glance, but Diana's trained eye caught something that made her breath catch in her throat. The serial numbers on 2 key components didn't match the specifications she had seen on the engineering blueprints scattered around the office. This was no accident. This was deliberate. Diana felt a chill run down her spine as the implications hit her. This wasn't a mysterious technical failure that had stumped brilliant minds. This was sabotage. Someone had deliberately altered the engine to make it fail, and they had done it in a way that would look like a complex systems breakdown rather than simple vandalism. But who would do such a thing? And why? Diana spent the next hour carefully, examining every component she could access without actually dismantling anything. Her engineering knowledge came flooding back as she traced connections, checked alignments, and identified modifications that had been skillfully hidden, but weren't quite perfect enough to fool someone who knew what to look for. The sabotage was sophisticated, Whoever had done this understood the engine's systems well enough to know exactly where to make changes that would cause cascading failures. They had altered the computer programming in subtle ways, making tiny adjustments to timing sequences that would cause different systems to work against each other instead of together. It was brilliant in a twisted way. Instead of obvious damage that would immediately suggest sabotage, the saboteur had created a situation that looked like an impossible engineering puzzle. Every expert who examined the engine would see the symptoms and try to solve them as technical problems, never suspecting that the failures were intentionally designed. Diana's mind was working at full speed now, connecting pieces of information she had gathered over months of cleaning offices and listening to conversations. She remembered overhearing phone calls, seeing documents, noticing who had access to different areas of the building. The picture that was forming made her feel sick to her stomach. As she continued her investigation, Diana documented everything she found using her phone's camera. She was careful to photograph the evidence from angles that clearly showed the unauthorized modifications, the mismatched serial numbers, and the subtle signs of tampering. By the time she finished her examination, Diana had compiled a devastating case. The engine wasn't broken, it was sabotaged, and based on the sophistication of the sabotage and the access required to carry it out, the saboteur had to be someone with high-level clearance and intimate knowledge of the engine's design. But Diana faced a terrible problem. How could a cleaning lady with no official credentials convince anyone that she had solved a mystery that had stumped MIT professors and industry experts? Who would believe that someone they barely noticed had uncovered evidence of corporate sabotage? Even worse, if she was right about who was responsible for the sabotage, coming forward could be dangerous. The person behind this had already shown they were willing to destroy a $50 million project and potentially bankrupt the entire company. What would they do to a cleaning lady who threatened to expose them? Diana finished her regular cleaning duties in a daze, her mind churning with the implications of what she had discovered. She had the evidence to save Richmond Industries and potentially hundreds of jobs. But she also had a teenage daughter to protect and a life she had carefully rebuilt after losing everything once before. As she prepared to leave that night, Diana made copies of all her evidence and stored them in multiple safe places. Whatever happened next, she needed to make sure the truth couldn't be buried if something happened to her. The next morning, Diana called in sick to work, something she almost never did. Instead, she spent the day researching corporate sabotage cases, trying to understand the legal implications of what she had discovered and the best way to present her evidence. She also spent time thinking about her daughter Carmen, who was counting on her mother to help pay for college. If Diana came forward with what she knew, it could change everything for both of them. It could lead to recognition and reward, or it could lead to retaliation and unemployment. But as Diana looked at pictures of the engine sabotage on her phone, she knew she couldn't stay silent. Too many people's livelihoods depended on Richmond Industries surviving. The truth had to come out regardless of the personal cost. That evening, Diana returned to work with a plan. She was going to approach David Thompson directly, despite the enormous risk involved. She had the evidence to save his company, and she was finally ready to step out of the shadows and reveal who she really was. Diana's hands were shaking as she knocked on David Thompson's office door. It was nearly 9 in the evening, and she knew he would still be there, working late as he had every night for months. Through the glass walls, she could see him hunched over his desk, surrounded by papers and looking utterly defeated. "Come in," his voice called out, sounding tired and distracted. Diana opened the door slowly, suddenly very aware of her cleaning uniform and the enormous gap between her position and his. David looked up, clearly surprised to see her. In 8 years of working at the company, she had never once entered his office for anything other than cleaning. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Thompson," Diana began, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I need to talk to you about the engine." David's expression shifted from surprise to confusion. "The engine? I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Are you here about cleaning around it? Because if there's a safety concern—" "No, sir," Diana interrupted, finding her courage. "I'm here because I know what's wrong with it. And it's not what anyone thinks." For a moment, David just stared at her. Then he leaned back in his chair, and Diana could see him struggling between politeness and frustration. Here was another person claiming to have answers when the world's best experts had failed. "Look," David said gently, "I appreciate your concern, but this is a very complex technical problem. We've had teams of engineers." "It's not a technical problem," Diana said firmly, cutting him off. "It's sabotage." The word hung in the air between them like a thunderclap. David's expression changed completely, his tired resignation replaced by sharp attention. "Sabotage?" he repeated slowly. "What are you talking about?" Diana took a deep breath and pulled out her phone, showing him the photos she had taken. "Someone has been inside that engine, making changes designed to cause cascading failures. Look, at these serial numbers. They don't match your original specifications. And see these scratches? Someone opened access panels that were never supposed to be touched during normal operation." David took the phone from her hands, studying the images with growing intensity. Diana watched his face as the implications began to sink in. "How do you know what the original specifications were?" he asked quietly. "Because I'm an engineer," Diana said simply. "Or I was before I started working here. Georgia Tech, then University of Michigan. 12 years in automotive systems before my life changed and I ended up cleaning your offices instead of designing engines." David looked up at her with new eyes, seeing her for the first time as something other than part of the building's maintenance staff. "You've been watching this project all along." "For months," Diana confirmed. "And I've been listening to conversations, seeing documents, noticing things that nobody thought a cleaning lady would understand. Mr. Thompson, whoever did this knew your engine inside and out. They had access to secure areas and detailed knowledge of the control systems. This wasn't some random act of vandalism." David set the phone down carefully on his desk. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Diana hesitated. This was the moment she had been dreading, the point where her accusations would either save the company or destroy her life. "Based on what I've observed, there's only one person with the access, knowledge, and opportunity to do this kind of damage." "Who?" David repeated, more forcefully this time. "Dr. Peterson." The name hit David like a physical blow. He actually recoiled in his chair, shaking his head immediately. "No, absolutely not. Peterson has been my friend for 15 years. He helped design this engine. He's been working day and night to fix it." "He's been working day and night to make sure nobody else fixes it," Diana corrected gently. "Mr. Thompson, I've been cleaning his office for 8 years. I've seen his phone calls, his computer screens, his paperwork. 3 months ago, right around the time the engine failed, I started noticing calls to Meridian Industries." David's face went pale. Meridian Industries was Richmond's biggest competitor, the company that would benefit most if Richmond's revolutionary engine never made it to market. "That doesn't prove anything," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Diana continued methodically. Like the engineer, she had once been presenting a technical analysis. "Last month I saw email drafts on his computer about finalizing arrangements and ensuring the timeline stays on track. Yesterday, while cleaning his office, I noticed a contract hidden under other papers. It was a job offer from Meridian Industries, dated 2 weeks after your engine failed." David was silent now, staring at his hands as the pieces fell into place in his mind. "The sabotage was too sophisticated for an outsider," Diana pressed on. "Whoever did this knew exactly which systems to target to create maximum confusion. They knew your diagnostic procedures well enough to make the failures look like impossible technical problems rather than deliberate damage. And they had to have access to do the work without being noticed. Peterson was here that weekend," David said slowly, as if the words were being dragged out of him. "The weekend before the engine failed. He said he wanted to run some final tests before the big presentation." Diana nodded sadly. "The evidence is all there, Mr. Thompson. The modified components, the altered programming, the unauthorized access to sealed systems. Dr. Peterson didn't just sabotage your engine. He did it in a way that would keep everyone looking for technical solutions while he negotiated his new position with your competitor." David stood up abruptly and walked to his window, staring out at the factory floor where the sabotaged engine sat. Diana could see his shoulders shaking with either rage or grief. Probably both. 15 years, he whispered. 15 years of friendship and partnership. I trusted him with everything, my company, my dreams, my future. I'm sorry, Diana said quietly. I know this is hard to accept. David turned back to face her, and Diana was shocked by the change in his expression. The exhaustion and defeat were gone, replaced by a cold determination she had never seen before. You said you documented everything? Yes, sir. Photos, timestamps, serial numbers, everything that proves the sabotage occurred. I also have copies stored in safe places in case Peterson tries to silence you, David finished grimly. Diana, do you realize how dangerous this knowledge could be for you? Diana thought of her daughter Carmen, of the college acceptance letter on the refrigerator at home, of the quiet life she had rebuilt after losing everything once before. Yes, she said simply. But I couldn't stay silent and watch this company die when I knew the truth. David picked up his phone. I'm calling our head of security. We need to secure all the evidence before Peterson realizes what we've discovered. Mr. Thompson, Diana said quietly, there's something else you should know. The way the sabotage was designed, it can be fixed. The engine isn't really broken. It's just been deliberately prevented from working properly. Once we remove Peterson's modifications and restore the original programming, your engine should run exactly the way it was designed to. For the first time in months, David Thompson smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. There was too much betrayal and anger for that. But it was the smile of a man who had just been handed the tools to save everything he had worked for. The next morning came faster than Diana had expected. She had barely slept, her mind racing with everything that had happened and everything that was about to happen. By 7 a.m. she was already at Richmond Industries, not as a cleaning lady, this time, but as a key witness in what was about to unfold. David Thompson had worked through the night with the company's security team and legal department. They had carefully documented all of Diana's evidence, verified her findings with independent experts, and prepared a case that was absolutely airtight. Now came the hardest part, confronting Dr. Peterson. Diana watched from David's office as Peterson arrived for work, walking through the lobby with the same confident stride he had carried for 15 years. He looked tired but pleased with himself, probably thinking that another day had passed without anyone discovering his secret. He had no idea that his world was about to collapse. David had asked Diana to be present when they confronted Peterson. You discovered this, he had said. You deserve to see justice done. But as the moment approached, Diana felt her stomach churning with nervousness. She had spent 8 years being invisible, and now she was about to be at the center of the biggest corporate scandal in Richmond Industries history. Peterson knocked on David's office door at exactly 8:30, just as he had every morning, for years. Morning, David, he called out cheerfully. Any word from the Japanese consultant? I'm hoping he might have some fresh ideas about the engine problem. David's voice was cold as ice when he responded. Come in, Peterson. We need to talk. Peterson entered the office, immediately noticing Diana standing near the window. His expression showed mild confusion. Why was the cleaning lady in the CEO's office during a business meeting? Peterson, David began, his voice steady but filled with barely controlled anger. I want you to meet Diana Williams. She's been cleaning our offices for 8 years, but what you don't know is that she's also a mechanical engineer with a specialty in automotive systems, and she's solved our engine problem. Peterson's face went through several emotions quickly, confusion, surprise, and then something that looked almost like fear. I'm sorry, David, but I don't understand what you're getting at. Diana stepped forward, her voice stronger than she had expected it to be. Dr. Peterson, I know what you did to the engine. I have photographs of the sabotage, documentation of the unauthorized modifications, and evidence of your communications with Meridian Industries. The color drained from Peterson's face completely. For a moment, he looked like he might collapse. Then his expression hardened, and Diana saw the man David had trusted for 15 years disappear, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "This is ridiculous," Peterson said, but his voice was shaky. "You're going to take the word of a cleaning lady over someone who's dedicated his career to this company?" David slammed a folder down on his desk, photographs spilling out showing the sabotaged components. "The evidence speaks for itself, Peterson. Serial numbers that don't match, unauthorized access to sealed systems, programming modifications designed to cause cascading failures. Diana found what dozens of experts missed because she was the only one who thought to look for sabotage instead of technical problems." Peterson stared at the photographs, his hands trembling slightly. Diana could see the moment when he realized there was no way out, no explanation that would save him. "How long?" David asked quietly. "How long have you been planning to destroy everything we built together?" Peterson slumped into a chair, suddenly looking much older than his 55 years. 6 months, he whispered. "Meridian approached me 6 months ago. They offered me 3 times my salary, stock options, a chance to lead their entire engineering division. So you decided to sabotage our engine to make sure they got our technology at a bargain price when we went bankrupt," David said, his voice filled with disgust. "It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone permanently," Peterson said desperately. "Meridian promised they would hire most of Richmond's engineering staff once they acquired the company. Everyone would have had jobs." "Everyone except me," David interrupted. "And everyone except the hundreds of other employees whose jobs depended on this company surviving." Diana watched this exchange with a mixture of sadness and anger. She thought about all the nights she had seen David staying late, all the stress and worry that had consumed him for months, all because someone he trusted had been systematically destroying his life's work. The security team arrived within minutes of David's call. Peterson was escorted from the building in handcuffs while employees watched in shock from office windows. The man who had been respected as one of the company's top engineers was now facing charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and industrial sabotage. But the real work was just beginning. Diana found herself working alongside Richmond's top engineers to reverse Peterson's sabotage and restore the engine to its original specifications. It was like stepping back into a life she had thought was lost forever. Her engineering knowledge, dormant for 8 years, came flooding back as she worked on the complex systems. The other engineers, initially skeptical about working with someone they had only known as cleaning staff, quickly realized they were dealing with someone who understood the technology as well as anyone in the company. 3 days later, the engine roared to life for the first time in months. The sound echoed through the factory floor, and Diana felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the machine that had caused so much anguish finally working perfectly. The performance tests exceeded everyone's expectations. Without Peterson's hidden sabotage, the engine delivered everything it had been designed to achieve and more. Within a week, Richmond Industries had 3 major automotive companies competing to sign manufacturing contracts. David called Diana into his office again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of desperation and crisis, there was hope and gratitude. "Diana," he said, "I owe you more than I can ever repay. You saved this company, saved hundreds of jobs, and probably saved my sanity. I want to offer you a position as our chief engineering consultant with a salary that reflects your true value to this organization." Diana thought about her daughter Carmen, about college tuition bills and years of financial struggle. She thought about her engineering degree gathering dust while she emptied trash cans and mopped floors. Most of all, she thought about how it felt to solve complex problems and create something meaningful again. "I accept," she said simply. 6 months later, Richmond Industries' revolutionary engine was powering vehicles across 3 continents. The company's stock price had tripled, and they had become the success story David had always dreamed of. Diana's office was in the engineering wing now, with windows overlooking the production floor, where workers built engines based on her designs and improvements. Her daughter Carmen was attending her first-choice university on a full scholarship. Diana could now afford to supplement. Sometimes, late in the evening when the office was quiet, Diana would walk past her old cleaning cart, still parked in the maintenance closet. It reminded her of how quickly life could change, how talent and determination could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. The woman who had once been invisible was now featured in engineering magazines and industry publications. She spoke at conferences about innovation and resilience, proving that expertise and wisdom could be found in the most unexpected places. But Diana never forgot the 8 years she spent cleaning offices, listening to conversations, and observing a world that barely acknowledged her existence. Those years had taught her something that no engineering degree could provide: the value of patience, the importance of seeing what others missed, and the power of speaking truth even when it seemed impossible that anyone would listen.